Light seeped over the wrought iron balconies of the French Quarter, turning beads caught in crepe myrtle branches to points of iridescence. Simone Delacroix angled the wheels of her green handcart into St. Anthony Square, brushed pink hair from her eyes, and inhaled the scent that had lured her across an ocean. Bruised gardenias, wet magnolia, river air thick with chicory roast. Paris had its grand avenues, but only New Orleans smelled like Saturday night glitter left drying on a Sunday morning. She unpacked lilies and ranunculus beneath a sign that read, La vie en rose. Practicing the easy Cajun drawl she still hadn't quite mastered. Tour buses would arrive soon, and she wanted the pitch ready. Cher, give these blooms a home. Let 'em jazz up your kitchen. First, though, she arranged the day's deliveries. 6 restaurants, 2 hotels, and the Verret Gallery on Royal Street, and tucked handwritten cards into each vase. When she reached for the crate of peonies that had arrived before dawn, her fingers brushed something cold and hard. She lifted a twist of pearlescent glass beads, the kind thrown from balconies during carnival seasons long past. Their weight told her at once they weren't the plastic trinkets tourists fought over. These were hand-blown, flecked with gold, and strung on tarnished brass wire. "Who would hide these in my flowers?" she murmured. A whistle cut across the square. Jasper LaRue trumpeter, part-time tarot huckster, and Simone's self-appointed big brother lounged on a stone bench with his instrument case. "Morning, Paris." He never used her actual name unless he was worried. "What you got there?" She held up the strand. Dawn light flashed through the beads like champagne. "Lord," Jasper said, rising. "Those look antique, museum pieces." Simone cradled the beads, a prickle of foreboding creeping along her scalp. "They came in my shipment. Could have rolled in at the warehouse, I suppose." "Warehouse?" He shook his head. "Wholesale trucks are locked tight. Besides, these ain't cheap. Somebody's using your flowers like a post office box." Simone forced a laugh, but it tasted flat. She tucked the beads into her satchel and finished loading vases onto the delivery tricycle. The Quarter was stirring milk trucks, rattling over cobblestones. A street cleaner hiss-sweeping confetti from last night's bachelorette parade. Routine, she told herself, yet she felt as though she'd stepped into a film noir and misplaced the script. The second strand appeared the next morning, coiled in a bucket of blue hydrangeas. Simone recognized Venetian foil cores and lamp-worked swirls. Definitely 19th century Mardi Gras. She hurried to Beauregard's Antiques en Chartres, where Madame Cellier raised a lorgnette to examine the beads. "These are Cru d'Olens, circa 1890, Simone declared. "Stolen 2 weeks ago from the Carnival Museum." Simone's mouth went dry. She thanked the woman, wrapped the strand in butcher paper, and strode back into muggy sunlight. Jasper's theory of a postal drop now felt menacingly plausible. Someone was smuggling museum loot using her stall as camouflage, and if the police traced the path, they'd find Simone's fingerprints all over the evidence. She shut La Vie en Rose early and cycled toward Chupitula Street, where Delgado Floral Supply operated a cavernous warehouse. Hector Ramos, the morning driver, was backing his truck to the dock when Simone rolled up. "Running low already?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. She lifted the hydrangea bucket so he could see the errant treasure within. "This was inside your shipment." Hector frowned. "I load straight from the coolers. Never saw that." "Anyone else has access? Night loaders? Cleaners?" "Only me and Miss Genevieve. She signs invoices when she visits." Genevieve Boulard, curator at the Carnival Museum. Simone had met the poised brunette once, arranging funeral lilies for a benefactor's casket. Elegant, unflappable. Impossible to picture her sneaking through a warehouse at 4 a.m. with purloined beads. Simone left with more questions than flowers. If Genevieve wasn't involved, someone was piggybacking on her authority. And whoever it was needed the beads delivered somewhere, perhaps to an upcoming Masquerade gala, where antique jewelry could blend with modern finery until fences carried it abroad. Simone pedaled home past gas lamps, sputtering to sleep, memory drifting to her first Mardi Gras in New Orleans, gilded masks, a humid air electric with horns and drums. She'd felt reborn here after a Parisian life that had wilted like unwatered roses. She'd sworn never again to let complications overtake the simple joy of colour and scent. Yet trouble had rooted itself in her peonies, and she could not ignore it. Early Sunday, Simone set a plan. She borrowed Jasper's mini camcorder, palm size, battery-powered, and hid it in a papier-mâché magnolia blossom taped inside her cart. The lens pointed at the buckets. If mysterious hands deposited contraband again, she'd have proof. Sleep fog still blurred her eyes at 5:15 a.m. when she arrived at the square. Moonlight silvered the paving stones. Cicadas hummed. She unlocked the cart, lifted tarp, and began lining jars. The camera's red dot winked alive. Minutes later, footsteps approached. Soft, quick, unhurried. Simone crouched behind a stack of crates, heart clanging like church bells. A figure in black jeans and a long dove-grey coat slipped into the cart's shadow. The stranger's face was hidden by a simple satin half-mask, as though they'd stepped out of a midnight ball that hadn't ended. Gloved fingers parted stems, extracted something from a pocket, and let it drop among the roses. Simone inhaled to call out, but the figure straightened, turned west toward Decatur Street, and melted into fog without a glance back. She waited 3 beats, darted to the roses, and found another strand of beads emerald glass with brass fleur-de-lis spaces. Her pulse hammered with adrenaline and grim vindication. She had the thief, on camera, but still no identity. Jasper whooshed in at dawn, trumpet dangling. "Got your text, you okay?" She replayed the footage on the tiny screen. The quality was grainy, but the silhouette revealed a slight tilt of head, a confident gait, coat hem embroidered subtly with what looked like peacock feathers. Jasper whistled low. "Tonight's the mayor's masquerade at the Cabildo," he said. "Crew captains, donors, all that sparkle. Bet our buddy here plans to waltz in, beads already hidden in approved decor. You deliver flowers, pay no mind. Museum relics vanish amid the revelry." Simone rubbed her temples. "I'm delivering centerpieces to that gala. 40 arrangements. They hired me months ago." "Then you're the getaway car, Paris, unless we flip the script." The Cabildo, once the seat of Spanish colonial government, now hosted balls that flirted with decadence. Its long arched gallery faced Jackson Square. Spanish moss dripped from nearby oaks, lit by amber uplights. Simone unloaded wooden crates, while uniformed valets whisked limousines along Pirates Alley. Inside, chandeliers blazed over parquet floors, and hired staff erected buffets laden with boudin bites and oysters. Guests wouldn't arrive for hours, but Simone worked quickly magnolia garlands along balconies, roses and orchids in mercury glass vases, floating camellias in fountain basins. She'd stayed up until dawn swapping the thief's latest strand with a resin counterfeit Jasper had procured from a costume shop. The genuine beads lay in a mason jar beneath her apartment floorboards. Every suspicious strand from earlier days soaked there, too. Safe. Meanwhile, she'd wired tiny tracking dots into several centerpieces. Jasper, moonlighting as band leader for the gala, would monitor the receiver. At 4 p.m., Simone carted the final arrangement, a cascade of white dendrobiums, into the foyer. A familiar voice drifted behind her. "Madame Delacroix, your blooms are poetry." Genevieve Boulard appeared in a navy jumpsuit, pinched at the waist, phone pressed to ear. She ended the call, smiled. "Thank you," Simone said carefully. "I'm surprised to see you before curtain time. I consult on historical accuracy for tonight's tableau." Genevieve gestured to mannequins dressed in vintage court costumes near the staircase. "We're recreating the 1884 Grand Bal de Rex." Simone's mouth dried. 1884 was the era of every missing strand she'd found. Coincidence or confession? Genevieve stepped closer. Your flowers exquisite, yet something's off. She plucked the resin bead peeking from an orchid spray. A trinket? Simone's heartbeat stumbled. Client requested some carnival flair. Thought the beads were festive. Genevieve rolled the bead between manicured fingers. Plastic undermines authenticity. She pocketed it, turned crisply, and disappeared onto the balcony. Simone exhaled raggedly. So the curator recognized that particular strand on sight. That didn't prove guilt, but suspicion felt heavier than Spanish moss. By 9, the ballroom shimmered with costumed guests. Spanish counts twirling with costumed guests. Spanish counts twirling with costumed guests. Skeleton kings clinking sazeracs with flamenco dancers. Masks glittered. Brass horns wailed. Bass drums boomed like thunder across the levee. Simone, now in an ankle-length black dress and feathered mask, wound among tables pretending to check water levels. Her earpiece crackled. Jasper from the stage hissed, "Tracker 2 is moving. Northeast exit, 2nd floor." Simone pivoted. She ascended a staircase, avoiding waltzing couples, and reached a gallery lined with French doors. The tiny receiver in her clutch showed a pulsing dot behind the 3rd door. She eased it open. Moonlight spilled onto cypress floorboards. Her figure stood at the balustrade, coat now replaced by an emerald satin cloak. They unfastened a centerpiece, fingers deftly separating stems to pluck out a hidden pouch. Simone flicked on the sconce. "Step away," she said, voice trembling. The thief whirled, mask of black lace hiding upper face. In gloved hand lay the pouch. Instead of fleeing, the figure cocked their head, almost admiring the interruption. "Madame Delacroix?" The voice was low, warm, unmistakably female. "I suppose congratulations are in order?" Simone advanced, anger supplanting nerves. "Why me? Why flowers? Because no one suspects the florist?" She removed the mask. Genevieve Boulard's hazel eyes gleamed, softer than Simone expected for a criminal. "Deliveries are invisible," she continued. "Museum doors required codes, cameras, insurance audits. I engineered a theft to fund preservation projects the board refuses to approve. Stained glass restoration, mold remediation. These beads will fetch enough to save half the exhibits." Simone stared at her, stunned by the audacity. "You're stealing history to save history?" "Precisely. And framing me in the process." Genevieve's smile turned rueful. "Collateral? You once imported contraband camembert for a bridal bouquet. I knew you bent rules." "Cheese isn't felony artifact theft." Genevieve lifted the pouch. "Help me, Simone. Nobody gets hurt. The city keeps her legacy intact." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Jasper's trumpet call wafted faintly below, the cue that security was on its way. Simone's mind raced. Turn Genevieve in, watch a museum crumble under budget cuts, or a better heist and betray her conscience. She met those pleading hazel eyes. "There's a third option." Simone took the pouch, opened it, and removed the resin fake she'd planted earlier. Genevieve frowned in confusion. "The real strands," Simone said, "are far from here. You can still petition the board. I'll testify to their negligence. But you're surrendering, tonight." Genevieve's nostrils flared. "You'd ruin everything?" Simone stepped close. "You already have. But maybe we salvage both our futures. Confess, become whistleblower, and the city rallies around the museum instead of burying it in scandal." Genevieve's shoulders sagged, cloak shimmering like scales. In her eyes Simone saw fatigue. Years of begging donors, watching artifacts rot. She nodded once, whispered thin. Security burst in, 2 uniformed officers. Among them, Detective Léon Gauthier, Jasper's cousin, held the video still Simone had emailed earlier. His gaze darted from Simone to Genevieve, to the empty pouch. "I'll explain," Simone said quietly. "She's ready to cooperate." Genevieve closed her eyes, mask dangling from limp hand. "Yes," she whispered, "I am." Dawn blush glazed to Mississippi when Simone wheeled Le Vion Rose onto St. Anthony's Square Monday morning. Newsboys hawked headlines. Curator turned state witness in bead theft scandal. City Council promised emergency funds for the Carnival Museum. Philanthropists pledged matching grants. Genevieve faced charges but was out on bail, already drafting a restoration roadmap. Jasper lounged on the bench, trumpet case open. He'd heard the good word, Paris. You saved Mardi Gras, past, present, and future. Simone eyed her buckets empty of contraband, fragrant with fresh freesia. Couldn't have done it without your spy gear. "Thinking of adding detective work to your resume?" she laughed. "I prefer petals to pistols." A tourist couple ambled over. Simone held up a bouquet of sunflowers and spiraled amaranth. "Morning chair? Give these blooms a home. Let 'em jazz up your kitchen." They bought two, snapping photos of Simone beside her cart. As they walked off, Jasper nudged her arm. "Look what they left!" Inside a daisy cluster lay a single iridescent bead. Modern plastic. Harmless. Almost a blessing. Jasper chuckled. Some habits die hard. Simone twirled the bead between her fingers, then tossed it toward an overhanging oak limb. It caught sunlight, spinning, sparkling, then settled among leaves where tourists would photograph it for years, never guessing the storm those little orbs could stir. She breathed in magnolia, river mist, jasmine perfume of a city that had claimed her. Paris might always be her birthplace, but New Orleans, wild, brassy, perfumed and perilous, was her home. And as long as her cart rolled under its balconies, history would ride safely in her flowers, celebrated rather than stolen.